A journalist pushed too far, but Barron Trump's composed response flipped the tables in the most surprising way. The air in Washington, D.C. was thick with expectancy. Inside the cavernous hall of the Kennedy Center, cameras flashed and voices buzzed in an enthusiastic symphony. It was a public event hosted by a prominent arts foundation, with visitors ranging from political figures to a list of celebrities. The atmosphere was formal but energetic, setting the stage ideally for unexpected drama among the throng. Melania Trump surprised onlookers not only for her elegance, but also for her calm presence. Dressed in a fitted white suit, she glided effortlessly through the room, providing courteous smiles and brief discussions for Melania. Such appearances were nothing new, but tonight felt different. Perhaps eyes followed her every move, and behind those eyes, judgments brewed in the far corner, where an ambitious journalist, known for their bold and often polarizing approach, spotted her. This wasn't just any journalist. They had a reputation for turning moments of vulnerability into headline-grabbing spectacles, and tonight they had their sights set on Melania with their questions prepared microphone in hand, and they began weaving through the crowd, determined to corner their target. But neither Melania nor anyone else in the room anticipated the role her youngest son, Barron Trump, would soon play in what was about to unfold. The night was just getting started, but no one could have predicted the storm brewing in the seemingly calm room. The Kennedy Center glittered under the illumination of its chandeliers, reflecting the grandeur of the evening. Guests mingled in clusters, their laughter and chatter echoing gently against the high ceilings as servers walked easily through the room holding trays of champagne. Flutes and hors d'oeuvres add elegance to the already polished ambiance. Melania Trump, as always, commanded attention without trying. She carried herself with a poise that turned heads, but it wasn't her outfit or jewelry that captured people's attention. With each handshake and greeting, she exuded a calm confidence, a stark contrast to the buzzing energy of the crowd not far from her. Barron Trump was taller than many adults in the room and was growing into his own at the age of 18. He conducted himself with a maturity that often astonished those around him while his mother engaged in talks. Barron stayed close, scanning the room like a protective shadow. He wasn't one to seek attention, but anyone who noticed him couldn't help but sense an understated presence across the room. The journalists known for their sharp critiques and on-the-spot interrogations saw their opportunity. They had been waiting for a chance to challenge someone of Melania's stature, and this was their moment, gripping their microphone tightly and nodding to their cameraman to follow. As the journalist moved in, the ripple effect began to spread. Melania was speaking with a small group of event organizers when the journalist made their move with the microphone poised and a camera rolling. They approached her as if they were just another guest looking to engage in conversation, but their intentions became clear the moment they opened their mouth. "Mrs. Trump." Their voice began cutting through the ambient noise. "Your tenure as First Lady was defined by controversy. Some critics say you stayed silent on topics that mattered most to the American people. Do you believe you fulfilled your role? Had spikes concealed within it?" Conversations in the room faltered as people began to tune in, intrigued to the journalist's sudden audacity. Melania paused, her expression calm but guarded. She was no stranger to public scrutiny, and her years under the spotlight had taught her how to maintain composure. Still, the pointed question demanded a response, and the journalist wasn't about to let the moment go without pushing further. "You've often been criticized for not speaking out against your husband's policies," they pressed. "Do you feel that your silence contributed to the division in this country?" The camera zoomed in, recording every aspect of her expression. The journalist's tone wasn't loud, but it was forceful, aimed to put her on the defensive. A murmur rippled through the room as guests exchanged anxious glances. Some muttered, while others craned their necks to have a better look at the unfolding scenario. Melania opened her lips to speak, But before she could say a word, a voice ripped through the tension like a knife. Was this the correct time or place for that kind of question? Barron stood straight, his tone calm but firm. He went forward, placing himself between his mother and the journalist. The room went still as all eyes turned to him. The journalist hesitated for a moment, but their expressions suggested they weren't backing down just yet. This was far from over. The journalist turned to face Barron, momentarily caught off guard. It was clear they hadn't expected the young adult to step in, let alone with such quiet authority. Barron stood firm, his gaze steady but respectful for someone his age. He exuded an unusual composure, and his words carried a weight that was silent. My mother has spent years being judged, condemned, and misunderstood. Tonight, she's here to support a cause rather than defend herself against loaded questions. The journalist instantly recovered, smirking slightly as they altered their stance. I appreciate your feedback. Barron, they replied with a dismissive tone. Yet these are valid questions. The public has a right to know what Barron interrupted his voice, raising just enough to command attention without seeming hostile, that you believe ambushing someone at an event meant to promote art and culture is good journalism if your inquiries were truly for the public interest. You'd schedule an interview, not corner her in a room full of strangers. A ripple of approbation went through the crowd, and others began nodding and mumbling in agreement. The journalist looked around, clearly aware that the tide was turning, but Barron wasn't done. My mom has been criticized for staying silent, but have you ever asked why she chooses to speak the way she does? She doesn't need to yell or point fingers to make an impact. Maybe if you listened instead of trying to provoke her, you'd learn something. The journalist opened their mouth to respond, but there were no words. The room had shifted entirely in Barron's favor, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a gavel striking at the close of a trial. The journalist's confidence faded, but the night wasn't ended yet. The aftermath of Barron's courageous defense would carry its own story for a time. The audience stood locked in quiet, save for the faint hum of the camera still filming. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, the tension shattered, and a wave of applause swept through the throng, beginning with a few timid claps that gradually gained speed. People turned to one another, some smiling, some nodding in agreement with Barron's surprising stand. Melania had stayed quiet during the exchange, placed a hand gently on her son's shoulder. Her expression was one of quiet pride, though she said nothing she didn't need. To Barron's words had spoken volumes. The journalist, however, looked anything but triumphant. They glanced at their cameraman, who was still filming, then back at Barron. It was clear they hadn't anticipated the young Trump's calm, yet razor-sharp rebuttal, any further attempt to press their point, would most likely backfire. Now still they managed a weak smile and The journalist's attempt to seize the moment had been completely flipped. The crowd, now buzzing with energy, seemed more interested in discussing Barron's eloquence than any of the questions that had been asked. A few attendees approached Barron and Melania, offering words of support and admiration. You handled that brilliantly, one man said, shaking Barron's hand. Your mother must be so proud. Barron gladly accepted the praises, but his attitude remained humble. He wasn't asking for attention or applause. Defending his mother was simply the proper thing to do. But as the night progressed, the moment began to take on a life of its own. Spilled beyond the gates of the Kennedy Center, by the time the event closed, the incident had already began making its rounds on social media. Attendees who had recorded the encounter using their phones quickly shared video of Barron's response. News sources caught up on the story, and by morning the headlines were tough to ignore. Barron Trump defends Melania in a viral scene. Young Trump silences journalists with composed retort, and family loyalty shines in heated encounter comment sections of web forums lighted up with conversations. Some complimented Barron for his maturity and eloquence, but others questioned the journalist's decision to attack Melania. At such an event, what stood out most was the overwhelming admiration for the bond between mother and son. People from all walks of life found themselves relating to the moment not as a political spectacle, but as a testament to the universal value of family loyalty. Meanwhile, at home, Melania and Barron were trying to process the sudden flood of attention. For Melania, this was nothing new. She had weathered countless media storms during her time as First Lady, but for Barron, sitting in their living room in Palm Beach, he stared at his phone reading through the endless flood of encouraging messages. "You didn't have to do that," Melania murmured quietly, breaking the silence, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. Barron looked up, his expression calm but resolute. "Mom, I couldn't just stand there and let them treat you like that. You've done so much for me. For all of us, they need to know the real you." Her eyes glistened, though she quickly blinked the tears away. "Thank you," she said simply. But the weight of those words hung in the air like a warm embrace, but beyond their private moment. The world continued to react, and Barron's defense of his mother was going to start an even larger conversation. The story of that night at the Kennedy Center did not simply fade away. It spurred a bigger discourse about respect, the role of the media, and the strength of family relationships under the glare of the public eye. Barron's calm defense of his mother reminded people that behind the titles and headlines, public figures are also human. For weeks, the clip was replayed across news channels and social media platforms, becoming a symbol of standing up for what's right even in the face of pressure. Commentators debated the ethics of the journalist's approach, while others applauded Barron for his composure and wisdom beyond his years. But for Barron and Melania, the moment was about more than public opinion. It was a private validation of their link, a reminder that no matter how turbulent or merciless the world could be, family stood as a shield against the storm as the media frenzy gradually calmed down. Barron returned to his life trying to avoid the spotlight, but in his quiet moments, he understood the significance of what had happened. It wasn't about proving the journalist wrong or earning applause. It was about honoring the values his parents had instilled in him: respect, loyalty, and courage sometimes. In a world frequently divided by noise and judgment, the simplest actions can send the most powerful messages. Barron's moment of grace was a reminder of the power of standing up not just for family, but for decency and respect. If this story connected with you, please subscribe for more tales that inspire challenge and remind us of what truly matters.